Good day, and welcome to the Budding Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Bridges. In each episode, I cover my experiences, both good and bad, of being a business builder, as well as my journey through the crazy world of entrepreneurship to reach my goal of earning $10 million a year. All right, we're on episode 103 of the Budding Entrepreneur Podcast. And since this is now July, we made it past our July the 4th celebration, and we are now moving forward through the month. I want to change up the strategy just a little bit of how I go about the podcast and actually break it down into more of like a series each week, having a slightly different process as we go. So week one, which would start this week, we're looking at the current month. What are the things that we're going to, focus on? How are we going to go this direction? What are some of our key performance indicators that we're looking for? And what are some of our long-term goals for this month? Things that we are committed to achieving before we finish the month. And then the reading that goes on, what we're doing, what we've committed to reading throughout the month. Week 2 is going to be progress against that and also learnings that we've incorporated into what we do. Week 3 will be pretty much the same thing. Week 4, we're going to look at the upcoming month and look at some of the indicators that we're going to be focusing on for the following month. Not necessarily getting into the long-term goals, but lining up some of the readings that are going to be occurring. That's kind of the process that we'll be going through, and it's going to be week by week. This particular month, I want to take this right out of order. Yeah, everything I do is structured, but it's fluid, and we do it based upon priority. Last week, and in fact the last couple of weeks, I've been discussing a book, 10X is Easier Than 2X, and I erroneously made it that Dan Sullivan was the author. And it turns out that Dan Sullivan is simply a collaborator with Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And so the 10X is Easier Than 2X is still on our list. It's one for July. I'm adding a book by Dan Sullivan with Dr. Benjamin Hardy, and it's called The Gap and the Gain. Now, these two books alone are going to be, pretty good reading. And in fact, the 10X is Easier Than 2X has given me a perspective on my own programs that are a little bit different than what I had before. So it changes my target market for my programs that I'm approaching. And so this has actually been very helpful to me. I'm also waiting for Taylor Welch's book on the Wealthy Consultant series to be dropping at the end of this month. And he's actually got out the cover slide. It was on Facebook group today. And so that's a really good thing. We're looking at that. I'm looking forward for that. That's going to be really cool. So looking through some things that this week has kind of uncovered, and I'm going to just pull out some quotes here. There are going to be 4 of them. And I'll take them not in any one particular order, but I think that this is important for people who are just getting started in business, especially to consider. I know that there's one client that's had, in the past that I have had some issues with this because they don't see things the way that I do. It's from Dan Sullivan, and it says, "The way to measure your progress is backward, against where you started, not against your ideal." And that's really critical. I don't really think too much of it as I'm doing things because I am looking backwards and forwards. In going through my program, I'll slide forward, then I'll slide back. I might jump ahead to an episode module, then go back a couple of episodes and revisit the material. So now I have a view of where I'm headed so I can actually measure my goal against not the ideal of the finishing of the program, but in fact, where I've gone since the very beginning. That's a really good quote to kind of keep in mind. People lose track of that quite frequently. Look backwards, don't look always forwards. Okay. Now, There are some other quotes that I want to take, and they're all kind of condensed from a book that I just recently ordered and put this into it. It's called A Happy Pocket Full of Money. And I don't know the author's name right off the top of my head, but it's kind of a mouthful. He's got a first name, middle name, and a last name. I remember that. But I wanted to take some of the condensed ideas as quotes. They're semi quotes. They're probably put together from the quotes, but these are, I think, important quotes to put us in a position where we can keep our perspective. And it's talking first about money, then time, then attention. So this first quote goes like this: money is the physical representation of value that rises and falls in ourselves, not within things outside of us, but within us. For without us, what's the value of a thing such as a car? Nothing, at least not to us. In other words, it is we, the observers, that place value in things, but this value is really value in us. We give value to material things. The material things have no money value in themselves. We give it to them. And this is kind of an important distinction that I've often wrestled with myself, because we understand that money is this big thing, and yet we also understand that money is not the end-all, do-all, be-all of what we're doing. You can't take it with you. But what's the saying from, there was a series called Dead Like Me, where this teenage girl gets hit by a toilet seat from the Mir space station, and she becomes a Grim Reaper. And one of the quotes she has is that, you mean all we get to keep are the memories? And her mentor looks at her and says, that's all we ever had, Peanut. And so as we're going through and doing things, our perspective of what we have and what we do with it will change over time. I've noticed it in the last 10 years. My perspective on money has changed quite a bit. One of my most common and frequent statements is, it's not really a problem when you don't have money, because you simply don't have it. It's a problem when you do have it, because everybody else wants part of it. And they may not necessarily even deserve it, but that's kind of common. I've seen that come out of my mouth many, many times as perspective for different issues that are going on. So yeah, money, it's not the physical representation of value. Okay. So the second quote from this same book is for the people that tell me I don't have enough time. That one drives me crazy. And so here's the information. Time is local to the observer, to you. In reality, there is no time, only all events all at once. It's your motion through these events that make you feel as if there is time. Everything is balanced on motion and perception. We'll talk about perception in a couple of minutes, but essentially, if you don't have enough time and you have the same 24 hours everybody else does, the big question becomes, how are you using that time? Have you ever noticed that time seems to slow down when there's not much happening? And yet, when there's a lot going on, it just flies by. Time is perception-based. It's your movement through it. And I agree with that. That's a, there's a lot of theories that are out there. A lot of people think that time is the constant. But we've taken cesium atom clocks, kept one in a secured vault and put one into a space station and sent it up, and then returned to Earth, and there's a difference in time. When you move away from the Earth, time slows down. So if time was a constant, it would remain a constant. It's just as simple as that. So, what we do with our time is based on our perception and our movement through it. And if we're not moving, things are going to slow down. Okay. The third one, and this is related to that, whatever you put your attention to gets energy from you and grows. Remove the attention and it dies. Have you ever noticed, going through this, that when you are considering having something and you're concerned about it or you want it and you start thinking about it, if it's something that you want to avoid, you tend to get more of it. If it's something that you really want, guess what? You tend to get that as well. And so whatever you put your attention to, that's what you tend to manifest. And it isn't necessarily you manifesting it. I believe that it's the world delivering on the request and the manifest you've delivered to say, I want this. I don't need it, but I want it. Right? We've had this little question of wants versus needs in, I believe, last week's podcast. And so this has been, a really good week to get some of these quotes and wrap them up. I hope that they made sense to you and that they were useful for you. Moving on to the long-term goals within this month, I'm looking to try to finish Module 5, and there's a lot of parts of it. I'm on 5.7, and I think there's 16 parts. So it will be a really aggressive schedule, especially since I am going to be moving forward, then moving backward, pulling forward, and doing iterative steps. Literally two steps forward and one step back, 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But it helps to keep that perspective on where I am. Now, under the topic of KPIs, so anytime you're doing anything in sales, you're dealing with impressions and exposures. Impressions are what somebody sees, whether it's cognizant that it's been seen, and actually it's shown. And then exposures is somebody's actually seen it, taken essentially like a picture of it, and incorporated it. And I was given a task to start keeping the core KPIs as I go through what is, my activity on it. Like, for example, today's blog post or podcast is going to be turned into a blog post, which will be turned into a video, which part of it will go to social posts, and I'll probably go to an event or two this month. All of this represents an impression and an exposure. For everything you hear of what I do, that's an exposure. So the idea is I've got batch emails and individual emails that I'm dealing with every day, keeping track of them. The social posts, the blog posts, the podcast, the videos, and the events that I attend. Now, all of that is to set me up for an introductory conversation. This was the one that kind of gets it makes me really uncomfortable, because these introductory conversations have always in the past been somebody else trying to sell me and I'm trying to sell them. And that's for later on. So if you miss the motivation in the introductory conversation, it might just be to hear what the other person has to say. And a lot of times you can get really good information by talking with somebody, just casually, meeting over coffee, and not so much on a Zoom, but it does happen, especially with distance. And one of the key things that was the most uncomfortable for me was, how do you strike up a conversation with someone who is essentially your competition? You want to pick their brain. You want to shortcut the process to success. And so these are like direct messages and texts and emails that you're sending as conversation pieces. I'm trying to dig out conversation. The goal in this process is to take an introductory conversation and determine if a sales call is even viable. It might not be. You may not. I had a conversation with a gentleman at a grand opening. And it turned into a many years relationship with both of the two owners, well, the owner and his brother. I worked with them for years, providing some of the services that I was doing for my own clients. That way I didn't have to spend the money to do it because I already had it built. Well, as long as I can afford to pay them and I can get clients that would agree to pay me, hey, it was a win-win. And so this went on for many years. And so this is where in the sales call process, you're looking for phone calls, some Zoom meetings, but a lot of one-on-one meetings. We want to just kind of pick out what the person is doing, what they're, set the tone of, are they capable of even moving beyond this? And so that's where you get into your sales script process. At the end of that is you want to make sure that everybody is, you're providing some value and everybody is walking away with something that they actually want. That would be the lead in to clients and referrals. So how much money did you bring in this month? What are your success stories? What are your reviews and referrals? Are you asking for people to give you a referral? Are you asking for people to give you a review? And it's great that the review process is actually built into my CRM, because I can just send a request off to somebody and they fill it out and complete it, and it shows up in my Google reviews, which is easy. And I wish more people would actually incorporate that kind of a concept. A lot of companies try to put it as an add-on, and it's an essential part of the business. So looking at this, the KPIs, the core ones, especially right now, through my program, dealing with impressions and exposures, then introductory conversations, then sales calls, and finally clients and referrals, reviews as well. So these are the KPIs that I'm working against. I implore anybody who's serious about becoming successful in what they do and being seen as a thought leader to begin actually learning how to create these types of things. Not necessarily ads only, although that's pretty much an easy introduction for people, is to actually do a lot of writing and spend a portion of your time every day, at least 20% of your day, generating content of some fashion, even if it's just a Facebook Live. Hi, hold up my camera. Hi, I'm doing what I'm doing here, right? And people are seeing it, they're watching it. There's personality attached to it. Writing isn't just the only thing. Some people want to hear it. And that's one of the reasons why I take my podcast, convert it into blog posts for those who want to read it, and then convert it into video for those who want to hear it and watch it. And so these types of things, and then I pull that out for my social posts. And it creates a dynamic that as I'm going through, I can see when I'm working and when I'm not on a day-to-day basis. So this is episode 103, wrapping it up. Again, this is the month we're looking at. Week 1, we're going to be looking forward. Week 2 is our progress and our learnings. Same thing for week 3. Then week 4 is going to kind of be a review and what are our next steps. So this is Randy Bridges, wishing you the best in your health, your wealth, your business, everything about you. Take care and have a great week. We'll see you on the other side of the weekend. Bye now.